I'm a painting restorer based in Barcelona, and one of my clients recently decided to bring his old salon back to life. You might actually recognize it. It was featured in the movie Perfume, the story of a murderer. That's where they filmed the perfumer's shop. At first, I was only restoring the paintings, but then we discovered that a lot of interior details were missing. So now I'm recreating those as well to fill the gaps. We agreed on the amount of time I'd spend on each piece, and today I'll walk you through what I'm doing and how. By the way, I'll also show you a quick trick for making these little wood panels I'm painting on. The edges aren't perfectly straight, but honestly, for our purpose, there's no need to obsess over that. The pieces will be framed anyway. Here's a photo of how it's looking so far. As you can see, I've already done the Imprimatura. That's the first thin monochrome layer of paint. It sets the tone for the whole painting because the color underneath will peek through and harmonize the palette. It's a simple technique I always use. That's also why I went with more transparent zinc white instead of titanium. Besides, this base layer helps the paint stick better, making the whole thing more durable. The surface is less likely to flake in the future. But don't worry, even if that happens, there are ways to fix it. If you're into restoration, check the channel. I may have already uploaded a video on that. Now back to this piece. As you'll notice, I'm still avoiding pure bright colors. I mix in earthy tones everywhere. It makes the painting feel more natural, less harsh or cartoonish, and helps unify the color scheme. Of course, I still want to keep that fairy tale feeling, like something out of a storybook from a kingdom far, far away, so I do keep some bright color. In fact, the next layer will be even more colorful, but it's usually better to start with darker, warmer underlayers. The paint goes down more naturally that way. At the beginning of a landscape in oil, I like to focus on the big color and shadow shapes. Just a rough block in, no details yet. There's this saying, your painting should look interesting at every stage. That means bouncing around the canvas, upgrading all the areas little by little, instead of perfecting just one corner and leaving the rest behind. But yeah, I break that rule too. It's kind of like swearing off snacks after 6 p.m. and then reaching for a handful of almonds while watching a Tom Hanks movie. What can I say? Actually, I've been thinking of writing a script about a painter with a split personality who ends up investigating a crime that he himself committed. What do you think? Or maybe AI already owns everything now, and handmade things like scripts, music, paintings are just no longer needed? I get it though. Our painting sessions are a kind of art therapy, a space to shut out the noise and just make something. But hey, if you ever feel like sharing your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. I don't always respond, especially if a week has passed and I start feeling awkward about replying late. But I still read them. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against AI. Actually, I even use it to help with translations. My native language is pretty different from how things are usually expressed in English, so a little adaptation is needed here and there. For example, back home we call a certain plumbing part a water pipe knee, but in Spain the plumber called it an elbow. That led to a very entertaining moment of cultural exchange. In the middle of a puddle on my kitchen floor. Or take proverbs. In English you say, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. In my language we say something more like, better a tit in the hand than a crane in the sky. So yeah, it's not really about numbers. It's about what kind of bird you're dealing with. I find that stuff fascinating. I wouldn't call it culture shock though. It's more like cultural curiosity. Have you ever experienced something like that? Now's a good time to take a moment and talk about what's actually happening with our miniature painting. As you can see, the farthest mountain, the smallest one, has a touch of sky color mixed into it. That gives it a soft, airy feeling, like it's fading into the distance. On the closer mountain, we added just a bit of that same sky tone on the lit side because yes, light has color too. Think of it like this. Imagine sunlight passing through stained glass. It takes on the tint of whatever it moves through. Nature does something similar. The light itself carries a color. Usually we add white or blue, but in this case there's a hint of sunrise pink in the sky, so we're echoing that warmth. The distant fields, lighter and cooler. The ones closer to us, warmer and darker. That's basic atmospheric perspective. As for the trees, we've already blocked in the shadows using a dark green, almost brown. Why not just use black? Because black tends to feel cold and lifeless in shadows. Instead, our go-to is a mix of brown and green. Or if you're in a pinch, you can just mix a little red into green, and boom, you've got a warm, earthy tone. All of this actually comes down to one thing: soil. Yep, the color of the ground. See, the soil in every region, even in different parts of the same country, can be totally different. Red, ochre, black, brown. And that dust? It doesn't just sit there, it's in the air. It subtly tints the atmosphere, especially at a distance. That same dust even affects how light scatters, which changes the look of the sky. Of course, it's not as dramatic as how Hollywood likes to paint Mexico in films, but there's a grain of truth in it. So here's a little artist tip when you travel. Pay attention to the color of the ground. Some painters even collect local clay or dirt during their trips to mix into their travel sketches. Imagine that. You're on a tour somewhere in Greece and some odd guy starts digging in the dirt. His friends are like, "Oh no, don't worry, he's an artist." A bit eccentric? Sure. But hey, that's good conversation fodder for the neighbors. And honestly, if you're already into painting, you've crossed that line. And don't worry about looking normal. Too late. Now you're part of this little community, and maybe, just maybe, you're even obligated to be a little weird, so you don't stand out by being too normal. A paradox, isn't it? While the paint's drying, let me show you something. This is me picking out an easel. Doesn't matter what brand it is. What really matters is the weight. The heavier, the better. Especially if you're someone who tends to get expressive with the brush. There are so many little details that can make or break your experience. The right brushes, good paint, the right mediums to mix or thin it, proper canvas material, and even something as basic as how you hold the brush or where you stand while painting. Some of these things I learned in art school. Some I picked up from other painters, some came with time. But the one thing I know for sure, never stick to just one teacher. Learn from many and eventually you'll find your own voice. If you're curious, I put together a painting course. It's for beginners, but also for anyone who wants to ground their practice in real technique. It costs about as much as filling up your car, but way less depressing. You pay once and get access for as long as you need. Links in the description. When you sit down to paint a tiny field or a dusty little hill, you start noticing stuff you'd normally scroll right past. The way light hits a roof. The way a tree leans just slightly to the left. The way morning air feels different from afternoon, not colder, just thinner maybe. You begin to understand that the world isn't flat. Not just in the artistic sense, I mean emotionally. It's not just a good day or a bad day. It's 1,000 shades of in-between. And painting helps you name them, helps you hold them. People ask me sometimes, why bother with all these tiny details? And I get it, most folks will never notice if you used raw umber or burnt sienna in a shadow. But you notice. And when you notice, you care. Just you and the universe. You mix a color that's almost exactly the same as the one next to it, but not quite. You glaze a shadow that's already dark, just to give it that tiny push into depth. You add one little brush stroke of warmth to a cool sky, not because anyone asked for it. That's art therapy, right there. Not the loud kind with candles and group sharing the quiet kind, where your breathing slows down and your thoughts finally have somewhere to land. It's not about showing off. It's not about making something perfect. It's about making space inside your head where things stop spinning for a bit. And the more you do it, the more you paint, sketch, build, write, whatever your thing is, the more you realize that you're not just putting order on the canvas. You're putting order in your mind. At first, it's just shapes and colors. Then suddenly you're making decisions where the light goes, where the warmth should fade, when to stop, when to push. And weirdly enough, those same instincts start showing up outside the painting too. You start noticing when your thoughts are getting noisy, and you pause. You start fixing things in small ways, your desk, your schedule, your sleep. Nothing dramatic, just adjustments, like brushstrokes. And little by little, you start feeling like maybe you have more say in how your life looks. Not total control, life's messy, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to begin shaping something that feels like yours. That's the hidden magic of creating. It starts with paint, but it never ends there. Maybe it's just where I am in life right now after the war. The migration, starting over at 35 and somehow feeling like I'm 20 again, but more cynical. Spain is a warm and generous country, no doubt about that. But still, it's not built around migrants the way the US, Canada, or Australia might be. Here, some things feel quietly off limits, not in a hostile way, just distant. There are parts of life here that locals take for granted, that still feel a little out of reach when you've arrived from somewhere else. The most striking thing to me, honestly, is the future I see opening up for kids and teenagers here. It feels like if I had worked this hard here, like I was back in Ukraine, under these conditions, maybe I could have gone further. Or maybe that's just an excuse, or a half-truth, or a way to process all the change. Maybe it's everything at once. In any case, you can probably tell this whole thing feels a bit like a therapy session, painting, talking to you, sharing thoughts that I don't always say out loud. And if you feel like dropping a few of your own in the comments, I'll be glad to read them. Even if I don't reply right away, I still hear you. Because at the end of the day, that's what all of this is about. Trying to make sense of where we are, who we've become, and what we still want to build one brushstroke at a time. But maybe the real question isn't where you are, but when dot. Because sometimes it feels like I arrived in my own life a little late. Like other people got the map earlier, the instructions, the warm-up round. They already knew what mattered, and I was still trying to figure out which part of me to bring forward and which to leave behind. It's a strange thing, realizing you're no longer the youngest person in the room, but you're also not old enough to be wise. You're somewhere in between, with just enough experience to know how easily things can break, and just enough hope to still believe they're worth fixing. In moments like that, painting helps. Not because it gives you answers, but because it lets you pause the question. It says, you don't have to solve everything today. Just make this one color sit next to another. Just move your hand. Just paint. And sometimes that's enough. Because when you're rebuilding your life, whether it's in a new country, a new job, or just a new version of yourself, you don't need a plan. You need a rhythm. And art gives you that. One layer, one session, one honest hour where you showed up for something that no one else asked you to do, and you did it anyway. Funny how being alone has become kind of trendy these days. Not the sad kind of alone, but this new version of mindful solitude. People add a filter to their coffee and call it their quiet ritual. Being by yourself now sounds like a lifestyle brand, especially in big cities where you can vanish into the crowd and no one really notices. You're technically surrounded by people, but at the same time somewhere deep in your own head with a view of the supermarket. Sometimes it feels like being on a diet. You walk down the aisles, everything is shiny and available, but you don't really feel like buying anything. Maybe you're just not into it, or maybe you're too tired to care. And then you think, why not just go paint instead? You pick up a brush, make a few strokes, and suddenly it doesn't matter that it's Friday night and everyone else is out doing something. You're doing something too, something that feels real. Sure, socializing leaves an impression, but when you're holding a painting you made, that feels different. That feels like something you can actually touch. That's a kind of celebration too. There's something peaceful about not being in a rush. Everyone's out there racing to live their best lives, posting as much of it as possible. Meanwhile, you're just mixing ochre with green and realizing that right now, everything is fine. Not because life is perfect, but because you're not forcing it to be. This isn't about big accomplishments. It's just you and whatever's in front of you. And for some reason in that space, something honest tends to show up. You're not trying to win or prove anything. You just felt like doing something while the world made noise outside. And what came out of it might not be a masterpiece, but it's something that belongs to you now. So if it ever feels like you're falling behind or missing out or standing still, remember that noticing things is also a form of action, and painting, when no one's watching, can be more sincere than anything made for applause. In moments like that, you're not losing to life. You're just quietly stepping aside from all the noise. And that's okay. We're almost done for today, just adding a few final touches to make the painting feel more natural. I'll also add a layer of varnish and place it behind glass. It's going to look great. If this video made you feel something, share it in the comments and check out some of my other videos too. Thank you for watching.